In this video, we will talk about marketing decisions, specifically in CapSim Capstone 2.0. So the first things to do is to understand what aspects of decision making here are required. Again, you have all your product segments, starting from traditional, low end, high end, performance, and size. If you have additional products, they would be available here as well. So there are four decisions that you will be making here. One is price. How much are you willing to charge for this particular product? Next is your promotional budget. That is, how much are you going to spend for that particular product to increase awareness and then you have your sales budget, that is for your accessibility. That means when you actually go to the store, you actually see the product available and whether your salespersons are trying to push the product towards the customer. And then your forecast, how many units do you expect to sell? So let's tackle this one by one. So the first thing would be able, which is your traditional product. So, to have the information, here it is. So first thing is pricing. So the customer is willing to pay between $19.50 and $29.50, and the customers are pretty price sensitive, 23% of importance. So basically, the maximum that I can charge is $29.50 without losing customers. The second thing that you have to understand is you can actually charge beyond this range. However, you will lose about 10% customers for every 50 cents price outside the bracket. So you have to be very careful not to exceed the price limit unless absolutely necessary. I will talk about the conditions where you are necessary. So before you get to the pricing aspect, one of the things that you need to understand is what is your performance being measured on. So for that, you need to look at your pro forma balance scorecard. So balance scorecard is what we use in order to say how many milestones did you meet. So when you look at your financials here, these are the aspects: your profit, your stock price, your leverage, and so forth. And here are the full range. So 7 million and above, you get a full credit on this. Stock price is about $32 and above, you get a full credit. And your leverage of 2.8, sorry, 1.8 to 2.8, if it is in between that, you receive a full credit of 8 points on this. So now let's look at customer awareness and accessibility. You need to be above 90% on both of these, meet at least 39 out of 100 on your customer buying criteria, and your product count, they need 8 or above. Usually this is not required. However, to receive a credit, at least in my class, what I do is I curve that because I do not believe that 8 products are required to compete effectively. And then your SG&A expenses, that means sales, general administrative expenses. So you got to keep this in check because your advertising expenses are also part of this, which is your promo and sales budget. So you can have it between 7% and 20%, and they should not exceed that. So I will teach you a process that will allow you to, have that. Next, internal business process. So this is one of the key aspects, that is contribution margin. Contribution margin is nothing but basically your price minus the cost of goods manufactured in terms of your material cost and your labor cost and inventory carrying costs. So you want to keep this high. So you want to either reduce your material cost or labor cost or increase your price. That should be between 36% or higher. So this is very important when you're actually considering your pricing decisions that you're actually making. So let's go back to this pricing aspect. So for this able, which is a traditional product, if I'm charging 89.29. So 3 factors that I need to take into account. What is the range of price and how important it is? This is factor number 1 that is going to be determinant of this. So the minimum I could charge is $19.50, maximum that I can charge is $29.50. Okay. Next, what are my competitors charging? Okay, for this particular product. My competitors did charge, what is this? So $28, everybody charged 28 because round zero was a parity. Everybody was equal, everybody's products were identical. That's the starting point. So if I charge $28 here, let's assume I do. Okay, so what is going to happen to my contribution margin? So look at my contribution margin, it's only 32%. I need it to be at least 38%. Material cost, one, you can go back to your R&D and say, hey, I can actually reduce the mean time before failure, or alternatively, what you could also do is increase your price. Though the customer is price sensitive, you're trying to give them the best product you can. At the same time, you're trying to make sure you're having enough profit margin. So there's nothing wrong with increasing the price. So increasing the price brought you up to 35.5%, which is very close, and you cannot exceed that highest price without losing customers or having leftover inventory. The next question is going to be promotions. Okay, so in order to do that promotional and sales budget, I would ask you to forecast first. How do I forecast? So what I need to look at is here, this number, segment demand. That is going to be 8,067 units. Currently, as you see, there are 6 teams competing and 6 products competing. So that would be, I need to establish a parity demand. So for that, just use a simple Excel spreadsheet. Here's what I've done. So 8067 is what I have. This is round one. This is traditional segment. And what I did here is that I divided this 8067 by 6. That means that that is my parity demand. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this is the number of units that I have to sell to have an equal share of the market for everybody. So now that I know the parity demand, I need to figure out how many units I'm going to forecast. So for the round one, your product is not going to be very different from your competitors, so you do not have to, deviate from your parity demand unless you aspire to. So, or you need to. So generally what I would say is for round two, I would say this is your parity demand. What should you forecast is maybe about plus or minus 5% of this. So let's assume that I'm, having 5% additional. So 1.05, so that's going to be 1412. So let's say I'm 1412, 1412. So that this is only because it's not a manual entry cell, so it's a slide bar, so it only takes in increments of 10. So now that I've done this, I know my gross revenue for this particular product is going to be 4,195. Why? Because the price times whatever the price times $29.50 times 1410 is what's calculating that is going to be 1,495. So now I need to understand that I have to position between I have to increase my promo budget or sales budget that aligns with the SGA expense cap, that is 7% to 20% cap that you actually saw in balance scorecards. So this is a large segment. Why? Because this contributes to about 31% of your market. So overall, so this is a huge portion. So therefore, because you have higher sections of revenue or higher amount of revenue that you're actually getting here, so this times $29.50, the price that I've actually charged. Okay. Okay, and sales. So promo and sales, what can I do here? So that is going to be, it should be a percentage of this. I would generally say allocate no more than, lower bar, that is going to be 7%, is that's how much you can actually spend. So times 0.07. Okay, and then the higher limit is going to be that's 20%. So this is how much I can actually spend promo and sales. So however, I would not recommend doing that. I would generally say be somewhere between here. So let's assume you're doing 10 per, about 8% of this. So that's about 3,000. So let's assume that and then go from there. So that's going to be about 1,500 is what I could put in here. Okay. And 1,500. Sorry. Okay. So that's 1,500. So now my old awareness for this particular product was 55. I've raised it to 73%. Now let's look at accessibility for traditional. My old was 54. This time it is 58. So as you see, you have to allocate more for your sales budget compared to your promo budget. So let's assume that I actually increase this to 1,700 because it's still, as you see, is between the higher limit and the lower limit that I've established for myself. Okay, so right now I'm spending 1,700 and 1,500. That's 3,200 on this. So what decisions have we made here? We did make the pricing decision based on the factors. What is the customer willing to pay? How important it is? Okay, what are my competitors charging? What are my contribution margins? Am I meeting my profit margins or the contribution margin requirements? These are what I've done. Okay, and the next thing that based on that, I've decided that $29.50 will be an appropriate price for this segment. Next, promo budget. I've calculated the revenue that I will be receiving if I actually sell so much. So for that, I need to allocate a proportionate budget for my promo and sales. So therefore, I've done this, okay, in terms of trying to, allocate almost equally, but not similar amounts, a slightly higher amount for sales, all right, to increase my awareness and accessibility. My awareness went from 55 to 73, that is about 18% increase. And then here I have 54%, and now it's 60%, and this has increased only by 6%. Though, as you remember, in your balance scorecard, you need a 90%. That is an aspirational one that you could actually try to achieve it over a longer period of time. If you try to achieve everything in one go, you will not be meeting your profit requirements. So therefore, you have to budget how much you can actually do here. Let's proceed with Acre here, which is your next product. It is the low-end customers. So they are willing to pay between $14.50 and $24.50. Okay, and when I actually look at the customer report, okay, the low end, everyone charged $21 last round. Doesn't mean I have to charge 21 this round. So let me see how much is my contribution margin right now for Acre. Okay, the low end product. It is 27.8% is what it is. So I am unwilling to sell it at such a low price. So I need to increase my price, and the maximum I can charge is $24.50. But the customer is extremely price sensitive. So I will be very cautious when I'm approaching this way. Okay. So now I've said that I'm going to charge $24 for this particular product. And now let me calculate my demand. So low end, it is about 10,009 units is what the customer is willing to spend, the entire industry. So that's going to be parity demand is 1668. And let's assume I will sell around same percent or the maximum 5% higher than this, 1752. So I will stick to my parity demand here because I'm increasing the price and the customer is significantly price sensitive. So I will be trying to be cautious because I do not want significant excess inventory in this around 1670. Okay, there is very little R&D. I have not done any R&D in this one. So therefore, the chances of me selling more than what others will sell is pretty different because there is no differentiation of the product and I'm charging a higher price, not a lower price. So therefore, I should not expect to sell more than parity demand. So therefore, I've lowered my demand schedule to be at parity level. So that brings me about gross revenues of 4080. As again said, between 8 to 10, 8 to 12% is what I would actually send, though 7 to 20% is the requirement for SG&A expenses, which also includes your administrative expenses and R&D along with your promotional sales budget. So 4080 is what my revenue streams is. Okay. And my promo budget, let's assume I'm spending about 8% of or 7% of this. Okay. Or 20% of this. This is the minimum. This is the maximum of my SG&A expenses, not promo and sales. So 2856, so approximately about 3,000 is what I could still spend. So let's assume that I spend about 1,500 on this. Okay, so that increased my awareness from 52% to 71%, which is great. And now is the accessibility, which is going to be very proportionate or similar to what I've done in my traditional segment again. So as you see, older was 40, the new was 45, only a marginal increase because I need to increase my budget, but this round I will not, for the simple reason that I do not want to exceed my budgets. Now let me go look at my contribution margin. As you see, you're saying 36.8%. So which I'm meeting my contribution margin requirement in there. So next, let's look at your Atom, which is your high-end product. Again, look at the price. They're not price sensitive at all. High-end, they're willing to pay up to $39.50. So I'm going to increase it to $39.50, the maximum price that they're willing to spend. Now, next is the forecasting decision. The reason why I'm not looking at my competitor's price is the customer is not price sensitive. So your competitor's pricing has very little impact or little to do with what you're able to do here. So when it comes to the forecasting, again, when you actually see the entire industry is willing to spend up to 2,696, 2,967, 2,967. So parity demand is 495. My product is what I'm trying to give my customer the best I can in terms of my product configuration in my R&D. So 495, let's assume that I will sell 5% more than others, or my parity demand, that's going to be about 520. So I will actually make 520 units of this particular product. Okay, so that's about 220540. As you have to see that the revenues are half of this. So I cannot spend the same amount of promo budget. So again, let me calculate to okay, my highest and lowest. Okay, that's going to be 20,540. 20,540, so 10% of 7% of this on the low end of the spectrum if I decide to spend. And this is going to be high end of the spectrum, that is going to be 20%. So here, given that it's a small segment, I need to make sure that I am allocating sufficiently, not overspending, and customer is not price sensitive. So therefore, I have a little bit more liberty in spending. So I will not stick to lower limit, but I will be spending little towards the higher limit here. So let's assume that I'm spending about so 1,200. 1,500, that's 2,700 is what I'm spending here. So which is going to be about right between here. So 2,700 is what I'm spending, which falls between these two. Because I do not want to hurt my profitability significantly. As you see, my net margins are still 2867. Okay, so here's my decision. So my awareness increased from 49 to 60% on this, and my accessibility increased from 48% to 54%, which is again still marginal. Okay, this has to be built over a longer period of time. You could continue with the same thing for both a Gabe and Aft. As you see, a Gabe, which is your performance, the customers are price sensitive, and yet your material cost is really high. So you have to watch out for your customers in terms of what they're asking, what you're offering. So if I were you, I would charge 34.50, the maximum price that they're actually asking for. Why? Because their customers are slightly price sensitive, yet they are requesting or demanding a high-end product, so it's going to cost me money. If I do not, let's say, I charge 33, look at my contribution margin, only 24%. So that's not good enough. So that is the reason I'm actually trying to charge them a higher price, or whatever they're willing to pay the highest as they are. Okay, now if I actually go to your production, this has not been updated, I believe. 27. Okay, so still, 27.7%, that's significantly low. So I need to make efforts to improve that over a period of time. So now when it comes to forecasting, here 2294, because I'm making very little money on this, I'm not going to risk it. So I'm only going to sell it at 382 units is going to be my forecast. Okay, so that is my forecast here. So when I actually look at my revenues are abysmal. That is going to be, and I'm barely getting a profit margin of something here. So 13, so about, let's say I'm spending about 10 to 12% of this. So 13455. Okay, so if I actually spend the lower limit of this, that's going to be 902,691. So that means that I have to spend a lot more money here. So if I'm spending 1,400, that's pretty low. So as you see, if I'm spending only 700, my awareness is actually decreasing. So I have to increase it marginally to ensure that my awareness is growing, not decreasing. And now comes the accessibility. So without this, as you see, with still spending that money, I'm still at 33% lowering. So I at least have to spend as much to maintain my level of awareness, accessibility, not to lose out on customers as well as long term. So my effort is only to maintain here, because as you see, my net margins have significantly decreased. I'm barely making any profit here. Okay. Now the last one is a cave, which is your size product. As you see, they're not price sensitive, so I'm not going to look at my competitors' pricings or anything. So I'm going to charge them the utmost because they're willing to pay for a good product, and I've tried to configure it in such a way that I'm giving the best portable specs to my customers, so therefore they will be willing to pay. So the now is going to be forecasting decisions. 2347 is what's going to be sold this year from the entire industry, and the parity demand is 391. So I will try to increase this a little bit, because 391, as you see, that is 411. So okay, that's what I'm trying to sell. Okay, so again, my revenues are pretty small, so I cannot spend significant amount of money more than what I've done with Aft. So as you see, you're seeing this, so I'm going to try to match with that. Okay, so my size slightly increased in terms of accessibility than compared to the only 3% increase, and my awareness has marginally increased over last round, so I'll keep that there. So this concludes my marketing decision making. I hope this video was helpful in understanding how to make these decisions. And please note that this is only for round one. The dynamics change from round two onwards, and the decisions have to be made a little bit different. And you have to pay greater attention to your competitors' pricing and competitors' product specs more than just what your customer wants. Okay, thank you.